I am not even doing a sound today. Not on this part anyway. Welcome back, Sacred Contracts, Awakening Your Divine Potential with Miss Carolyn Mace, the best-selling author of Anatomy of the Spirit. Let's get into it. Welcome back, my good people. Okay, listen, before y'all judge me, don't, because I know I said I was dropping a video every day this week, but things happen, okay? It was my birthday week. Sometimes things got a little out of hand. It's okay though, because now I have clearly some catching up to do. So, un momento, and let's get into it. Okay, picking up where we left off talking about some more of sacred contracts and these archetypes. And actually, I think I have a little bit more. Let me see. So we left off talking about the spiritual accountability and things of that nature. Now we're going to talk about the shadow and your divine potential. It starts off speaking about how Jesus told his disciples about his miraculous healing abilities, right? All this shall you do and more if you have faith. The Buddha's enlightenment not only allowed him to view his past lives going back eons to become omniscient as well, he also told his followers that with diligence, they too could achieve enlightenment, and he urged them to be lamps unto yourselves. These enlightened beings saw that our highest potential as virtually unlimited. They were not necessarily referring to learning how to walk on water or effect miraculous cures, however, but to the fact that we can become as trusting of the divine as they. The Buddha insisted that his followers discover who they would be if they called their spirits back from attaching to the illusions of the external world. And Jesus said, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. Do you bring in a lamp to put it under a bushel or a bed? Instead, don't you put it on its stand? For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought on into the open. That is Mark 4:11 and then 21 through 22, just in case y'all wanted to know. To engage in the journey that takes us from living outside of ourselves to processing the world inside of ourselves means bringing light to our shadow. Your shadow aspects are primarily rooted in fear patterns that have more control over your behavior than does your conscious mind. This limits your ability to make choices in which you are aware of your motivations. Your shadow self includes emotional and psychological patterns that comes from repressed feelings that you do not wish to deal with consciously for the fear of the consequences. So, for example, rather than face the fact that your partner is in some kind of trouble or your child is using drugs, you may repress those strong, accurate instincts, possibly with disastrous results, as you may become short-tempered, angry, and depressed without even realizing why. Your shadow also contains the secret reasons why you would sabotage the opportunities that come your way. Having an unknown force controlling so much of the creative expression in our lives, of our lives, is a shadow. Eventually, we have to confront each of our shadow aspects. This exploration of our shadow, is so complex that it may be one reason why Eastern philosophy maintains that we need many lifetimes to achieve liberation. Your highest potential is that part of you that is not limited by its expression, by fears of the physical world and the business of living. It is what you actualize when you are willing to confront your shadow, openly acknowledge the reality of its presence within you, and then take steps to deal with it. To rely on your inner resource and to follow your inner guidance before all else is to express your highest potential at all times. It shows you who you would be if you could live constantly within the knowledge that genuine power exists inside the self and never outside of it. Confronting your shadow requires that you strike out on your own. That isn't to say that you can't receive help from friends or therapists or counselors, but you will have to make choices that exclude the collective needs of your family, tribe, or group and separate yourself from them. If you do decide to follow an inner call in this unavoidable psychic ritual of separation, you have to withdraw your spirit from the magnetic field created by the collective power of your group's will so that you can organize your own energy. Like a mystic or a seer might withdraw or hear divine promptings. Like Jesus going to the desert or Muhammad to the cave. This process of birthing your own power requires that you put yourself first, even though this may appear to the outside world to be selfish. During your separation, you will have to face the most narcissistic aspects of your ego, such as the shadow child, who is concerned only with its own well-being and will try to scare you back into the fold. Your shadow victim reveals its victimhood and will entice you to feel sorry for yourself for ever leaving. The shadow prostitute will urge you to sell out your integrity and your vision of true independence at the first opportunity it gets, and the shadow saboteur will play to your suspicions that you aren't good enough to accomplish anything on your own. You will have to strengthen your soul identity until it is strong enough to eclipse all these fears. You are birthing your power of individual choice, increasing your potential for insight and for opportunity, serving your highest potential. In dealing with the shadows, you ready yourself to accept full responsibility for the management of your spirit and the consequences of your choices. Just as your archetypes are neither good nor bad, your contract is essentially a neutral force. One person's contract is not more important to the universe than another's. Every contract is essentially the same in that it covers what each individual needs to learn in his lifetime. For that reason, we are put in places and in roles that best serve our contracts, whether that means we are born into royalty or poverty or somewhere in between. Whether you find yourself in a life filled with challenges such as illness, injury, or war, or whether your life is relatively free of trauma, you have agreements to keep and a contract to fulfill. There is a poor people suffering and a rich people suffering. So don't envy others because you can't know the extent of their suffering just by looking at externals. Whatever your material lot in life, any external difficulties are vehicles for you to work on your internal challenges. It talks about how people asked if those who commit murder, rape, or other heinous crimes, was that a part of their contract? And the answer is no. Like, nobody had a divine order to kill. It may be that some people have agreed to a life in which they encounter dark forces and have to choose how to deal with them. As each of us, is growing individually, we are also evolving collectively. Each of us has a dark side along with our grace and light. The extent to which we can acknowledge the former while maximizing the latter may determine how we choose to fulfill the terms of our contract. When the shadow side takes over even one person, the consequences are tragically felt by many. So, In this book, it talks about this psychologist named Stanley Milgram, and he wrote this book called Obedience to Authority. And it demonstrated that often it is not so much the kind of person a man is as the kind of situation in which he finds himself that determines how he will act. Milgram developed obedience experiments in which subjects were told scientific authority figures to administer electric shock to another person if he answered a question incorrectly. So if the question was answered wrong, they would get shocked, no matter how much that person reacted. Milgram had expected that American subjects would not follow orders that seemed to hurt another person, especially if the person being shocked were screaming in obvious pain. Much like you hear in my background, but they are not in pain, so ignore that. So Milgram expected that American subjects would not follow orders, but surprisingly, 65% of his subjects were willing to give apparently harmful electric shocks to a protesting and seemingly suffering victim. The subjects were not really hurting the other people, but again, this was a study. With numbing regularity, good people were seen to knuckle under the demands of authority. Okay, so remember, the extent to which we can acknowledge the former while maximizing the latter may determine how we can choose to fulfill the terms of our contract. When the shadow side takes over, even one person, the consequences are tragically felt by many. Let's continue. So with numbing regularity, good people were seen to knuckle under the demands of authority and perform actions that were severe. So if you think about the aftermath of World War II, when people had assumed that the Germans were more influenced by the orders than other cultures, the obedience experiments were a cultural shock for Americans who prided themselves on being nonconformists. Milgram said it may be that we are puppets. Puppets controlled by the strings of society, but at least we are puppets with perception, with awareness, and perhaps our awareness is the first step to our liberation. What is in one is in the whole. Murder and torture occur because humanity as a group does not yet sufficiently value life in all of its expressions. The lack of a sacred vision leads to the incarnating of bleak and brutal experiences. We all share potential for becoming either the instigator or the victim of harm, whether physical or emotional. What we do to heal the victim and the aggressor within ourselves is the universal contribution we can each make toward healing the whole. And if we are ever to achieve our highest potential, we need to be, at the very least, puppets with awareness. It is a basic spiritual impulse to try to find meaning in a tragedy, which awakens our need for greater action, justice, and protection of human rights. Uncivilized behavior, murder, and tyranny strengthen our belief in civility, civilization, and democracy. Undisguised bigotry and hatred wakes us to the need to practice love, compassion, and tolerance. Learning to confront and ultimately manage your shadow, no matter how daunting it may appear, is an essential step on your road to spiritual maturity. Your world can change once you decide that you and not your shadow will create your future. Many people fear their own empowerment and unconsciously encourage their shadows to thrive. This happens in particular when conscious empowerment represents change, which can be terrifying. Change signals loss of control and entry into the unknown. Sorry, y'all. So I'm gonna say that again. Change signals loss of control and entry into the unknown. But even beyond fear of change, empowerment represents isolation, which people will do anything to avoid. This is the very core of our paradoxical view of empowerment. Our image of awakening to and fulfilling our divine potential evokes the idea of an individual who is whole and complete, separated from lesser morals, isolated and alone. Culturally, we have yet to envision a realistic, appealing model of the spiritually empowered human being. Someone who is simultaneously vulnerable, capable of sensual love, and worthy of a mate. We believe that enlightened people don't have the same needs or vulnerabilities that we do, or the same shadows. We also believe that enlightened people don't age, don't suffer, or mourn. We do not want to be whole if it means being alone. And we do not want to enlighten if it requires leaving or living in a way that we are not comfortable with. So deep within our unconscious, we feed the energy of the sabotager, that part of ourselves that maintains our shadow pattern and fuel our fragmentation. We fear our own empowerment because it represents change in our lives that we don't like, and it will remove us from the warmth of those who we love or who love us for being vulnerable. And we fear being empowered because then we can no longer claim that we are not responsible for our actions. Although we want to be around a person who is enlightened or consciously working on becoming enlightened, we deeply fear the high price of our own enlightenment. What would it make us pay? What is the price? If I become enlightened, what am I losing? What am I having to give up? We cannot rest in the harbor of blame, so we unconsciously and sometimes consciously encourage our own weakness and hold on to fears. As long as becoming enlightened represents isolation for us, we will shun it. Like, we will just be like, nope. As a whole, you gotta think, like, you gotta remember that I'm speaking as a whole right now, culturally. Okay, thank you for that, Father. Culturally, we as a whole fear enlightenment. We fear to realize our highest potential, and this is inevitably effective. It affects our creative, financial, and our career potential. Okay? It's a lot. This is what happens when you take some days off and you got somewhat of a disability currently going on. But we're going to push through, okay? So, let's talk about Return of the Orphan. I hope y'all are following along. Take all mistakes for love, because we got this. Okay, Return of the Orphan. We could probably reduce all of our struggles with empowerment to our need to transform the abandoned, wounded, or dependent aspect of our child archetype to one that is healthy and self-sufficient. Example, everybody know it, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So in The Wizard of Oz, I love the fact that this book mentioned The Wizard of Oz because it is such a great representation of reading something symbolically, and it's so easy to follow along with once you are awakened and once you have the knowledge of how to read symbolically. So pay attention, okay? In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy has to seek out aspects of herself that she didn't know she had, including courage and intelligence well beyond those of the young orphan who left Auntie Em back in Kansas. Seen as an archetypal adventure, The Wizard of Oz represents the challenges of survival that we face on our own yellow brick road. Dorothy does not fit into the conventional tribe. Her consciousness is her own to develop from the beginning. So in the beginning of the story, the cyclone comes. The cyclone represents the chaos. That is the classic precursor to transformation. So as the tornado comes, she runs to the cellar. She tries to get with her family. It didn't work, so she goes back to the house with her dog, Toto. And y'all know the story. The cyclone or the tornado lifts the house. She hits her head. She loses consciousness. In the symbolic or archetypal terms, a house represents the whole of the self, from the subconscious in the basement to the superego in the attic. The whole of Dorothy's life is lifted off in the chaos and begins to spin, to be symbolically reconstituted. Having to undertake the hero's journey, she has awakened her charism, the special grace that will see her through her ordeal or her growth. Dorothy's journey takes her to Oz, where the house crashes down, and she says to Toto, she has a feeling that they're not in Kansas anymore. She begins to sense that she has been separated from her familiar environment, that what is going on is happening only to her, not to everybody else, and that she has to find within herself the strength and courage to endure what is coming. For the first time, she sees the Munchkins. The Munchkins represent fragments of herself. Like any hero, adventurer, or spiritual seeker starting on a journey of self-discovery, she asks, where am I? How do I get home? She's still confused. And the Munchkins tell her that she has to go to Oz. Oz, in essence, to go on a journey to an unknown destination. Okay, so Dorothy's guardian for the journey is Toto. Toto is the Latin word for everything. Toto is an extension of Dorothy. He is her intuition and an archetypal image of a guardian. In shamanic terms, we would say that Toto is her power animal. Toto is also Dorothy's reminder that everything she needs is always with her, if she'll just stay aware of what's going on. All spiritual traditions emphasize the need to keep your attention in the present time. As long as you remain present, everything you need is present with you. As soon as you project yourself back through the rest of your life, you begin to manifest a sense of vulnerability and insecurity characterized by fear or failure. Projection is the act of taking your present moment and stretching it across a lifetime, an impossible formula that will always leave you powerless. So Dorothy meets the Munchkin leader, who represents the unified self emerging to give her direction. Even as if you feel lost and you ask, where am I? A part of your interior self immediately arises to give an answer. In Dorothy's case, the answer is to go to Oz, and she undertakes her hero's journey. So on her journey, the four archetypes of survival, child, victim, prostitute, and the saboteur enter the playing field. Dorothy's orphan child has been leading to this point. Her basic theme, I'm a child, I've lost my way, I've got to get home. But the forces around her say, you're on your own, and it's time for you to grow up. At this point in the film, the two witches arrive on the scene, representing shadow and light. The Wicked Witch of the East says, I want your dog Toto, meaning that she wants to deprive Dorothy of her guardian. When the Wicked Witch goes after Toto in anger, Dorothy becomes frightened and her victim emerges. Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, holds off the Wicked Witch and gives Dorothy the ruby slippers The ruby slippers in this movie represents another charism or grace that will see Dorothy through her journey to Oz. Dorothy never takes them off. She even sleeps in them, making it hard for the witch to get them away from her. When the Wicked Witch says, "I want those ruby slippers," she is waking up Dorothy's prostitute. So remember, we talked about the prostitute. What the witch is actually saying to Dorothy is, at any given time, you can get off that difficult road if you will sell those shoes. That's the bargain. Every time you are given a new charism or a clearer sense of self, the prostitute will test you to see if you are willing to sell your new spiritual power for material gain of some sort. It's as though you won the lottery and someone calls you up and asks if you'd like to invest in some type of swamp, or, like something that's really no good. It's really not valuable. It's really not worth you doing. But they'll try to bargain with you. That's also where sabotaging comes in. The other archetype. Are you going to sabotage your personal growth for a little comfort, or will your inner saboteur alert you to danger in time to keep you on the yellow brick road? That's what the book asks. So, moving on. The next person Dorothy meets is the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow says he doesn't have a brain. Her interaction with him represents a dialogue with her own intelligence, in which for the first time she has to assess her intellectual reality. As an extension of her inner self, the Scarecrow will also have to go to Oz to get a brain, and so follow the yellow brick road. Down the road they go. Next comes the Tin Man, who has rusted into immobility and who, once lubricated, complains that he needs a heart. In symbolic terms, Dorothy also needs to awaken the sense of love and compassion that lies within. Both the Scarecrow and the Tin Man were dormant until Dorothy awakened them and herself to the need to go on the hero's journey to gain what they were essentially lacking. Next, they met the Lion, the Cowardly Lion, who is immobilized by fear. The lion lacks courage, which is a function of self-esteem and is related to will and choice. On their journey to Oz, Dorothy encounters many difficulties and detours. Each of them arouses the victim archetype in her. She can act like a victim and give in, or she can call on her companions and guides for help, which she does several times. The most dangerous obstacle is the field of poppies, which causes her to fall into a deep sleep along with the lion and Toto. Certain realities are too much for us to handle on a conscious level, and so we must process them in an unconscious state, like in dreams or deep sleep. You may notice yourself that if you're reading a book or attending a lecture that deals with spirituality or deals with spiritual anything or psychological, something that's heavy material, you may fall asleep. A similar phenomenon also occurs during healing services. When certain people go down under power, meaning that they lapse into momentary unconsciousness so that healing can take place on a deeper level. So sometimes it's just too much for us to grasp on a conscious level. It's too heavy, and we have to tap into our unconscious to get that information, whatever that may be. Some old wounds that are being healed may be too traumatic to be addressed consciously. Dorothy's transition from childhood to adulthood, from the orphan child to the hero, is going to require not only grace, but also a healing of her past, which is accomplished in part of the unconscious state. Dorothy and her companions eventually arrive at Oz and go before the wizard. As any good spiritual master do, he puts them to a test, saying that he won't help them unless they bring back the broom from the Wicked Witch. The paradox here is that you will always have a test to invoke grace, and you need grace to pass the test. You can't just suddenly become courageous. You have to act out courage to know that you have courage. So when they go to the castle, Dorothy is captured. Just like during our own spiritual development, even if we get past our desires, we always get captured in some way by our fears, and we feel isolated and abandoned. The prison in the dark castle is reminiscent of the dark forest through which Dorothy had already passed on her search to Oz in search of integration. The dark forest is a time-honored image of the dangers of the search for self. When stuck in a dark wood or a prison, we need to look to the saber-tooth, who reminds us that we must keep faith and not give in to our fears. At each stage of her journey, Dorothy is able to call on the lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow to rescue her. In effect, she is calling on her own courage, will, and heart, which she is in the process of unifying. As her three companions are trying to rescue Dorothy, the witch shows up, set fire to the Scarecrow, and in that moment began attacking her intellectual level, because remember, the Scarecrow needed a brain, and the Scarecrow represents her intellect. The mind is something that is attacked probably first when you are awakening. It often happens when people try to follow a spiritual path. The mind says, like, this is ridiculous. Like, people can get enlightened by meditating, by closing their eyes, by grounding, things like that. Anyway, so the Scarecrow is set on fire, so that's putting flames to her intellect. She throws a bucket of water representing her unconscious and throws it on the witch, thereby making her self-conscious. As the water hit the witch, y'all know, she's melting. She's melting. She screams in agony, and she hates Dorothy for doing the one thing that could free her of the witch's power, and then she melts away. As soon as Dorothy calls on her unconscious, the whole world that had once scared her dissolves, and she only sees safety. Dorothy and her companions return to Oz, feeling totally successful. They bring the broom to the wizard, only to be told that that's not enough. And then y'all remember, Toto is a guardian. So Toto like, nah, that ain't cool. He go and he uncovers the curtain that was over the wizard. He's the guardian. That's what he doing. But he also is showing Dorothy that she does not need to rely on a shadow guru to do her spiritual work for her. In fact, if you project your own needs and fantasies onto a guru, you may end up getting burned. Use your discernment. So the exposed wizard is forced to make good on his promises and help Dorothy find her way home from Oz. Although Oz represents the achievement of spiritual power and independence, it's essentially meaningless unless she can bring back home what she has learned and apply it to her everyday life. Spiritual insight is not an end in itself, but a means to transform our life on earth from mere survival and dominance into compassion and service to others. Dorothy is now confronted with yet another test, this one regarding false power. Even though the wizard has been less than forthcoming on his promises, Dorothy is planning to accept his guidance and accompany him in the hot air balloon. The ironic choice of a vehicle, but Toto jumps out the basket and Dorothy follows. Dorothy has the good sense not to want to be separated from her guardian, and she runs after him. And when this happened, the wizard escapes. He leaves. He's gone. However, the choice that she made caused Glinda, the good witch, to reappear And Glenda reminds Dorothy that she has had the power to return home all along. Only she didn't know it. The slippers were all she needed. Her words are reminiscent of the Buddhist teaching that we are already perfect Buddhists. We just don't realize it yet. And so we act like unenlightened children. If we truly knew we possessed Buddha nature or Christ consciousness or God realization, we would be home free. So Dorothy clicks her heels together as instructed. Oh, my arm. And she chants, there's no place like home. She chants, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. All right, y'all. Bear with me because I hurt my arm this week and it is hurting. So if you hear me do like a little grunt or something, just overlook it. All right. So Dorothy has completed her hero's journey. She's come to terms with her 4 survival archetypes and with courage consolidated her mind, heart, and will. Her most challenging adversary, the Wicked Witch, has proved to be the one who did the most to expand her soul. So remember the video, one of the videos that I made before that said oftentimes the tyrants are the ones who awaken us the most in a sense, or enlighten us the most in a sense, or push us past our own boundaries in a sense. Think about it and compare it to this. Her most challenging adversary was the Wicked Witch. But the Wicked Witch was proved to be the one who did the most to expand her soul. Dorothy appears to be in the same physical reality when she returned to Kansas, but she is not. She is fully transformed. She emerges not only as the frightened little orphan child, but as an intelligent, fully awakened heart consciousness in the same body. She has returned whole from chaos and her journey. Our work has essentially the same goal. By learning to recognize the archetypal patterns at work within our psyche, you can begin to view your life symbolically rather than taking every interaction personally and viewing it on only the physical plane. Like the lion, you need courage to look at the victim archetype within you and learn how to make it into your ally. You need the heart of the Tin Man so that you can love yourself when you see the prostitute at work in your psyche and turn it into your advantage. And you need the intellect. You need the intellect that the Scarecrow prized so highly. So you can work with your saboteur to recognize the warning signs that you are about to do yourself in. When you tie those together, you can use your will to transform the child within, whether it's the abandoned, wounded, or dependent, into an empowered being capable of directing your own life with passion and skill. For then you have the elements of the soul, the eternal self, and you are on your way to discovering your spiritual identity. Woo! All right. So this is what I got for y'all today. We will begin the next chapter on the next video. Forgive me if it felt or seemed like I was rambling through most of this video. Y'all, listen. I'm in straight recovery mode, okay? But I'm pushing through. So get out my bag. All right? Just take the knowledge and apply it. But no, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Thank you guys for wishing me happy birthday. Thank you for bearing with me while I get the rest of these videos updated, uploaded, all that good stuff. like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, just drop them below. I will get back to you as soon as I can. And I am going to now start working on the next video, so look for that one as well. Have a good day. Be blessed. It's May, okay? Be happy. Take notes from these videos. And we're going into a new chapter, and this new chapter is really going to require a lot of you to take notes. Because we're about to tap into some good stuff, some more good stuff. Love you guys. Bye.